Um, well, there's philosopher Immanuel Kant who
The fucking
says
cunt,
like
mate.
he wants to.
Welcome one, welcome all to the NewCrown podcast. That sounds so fucking weird to say, but anyways, I am Daryl,
And I'm Phil.
and today we're talking about something that's back to our roots, and it's basically we want to talk about typecasting, essentially because Hollywood and every single outlet regarding any films tend to like typecasting either characters to a specific actor or to match certain archetypes that are known in a specific genre.
Right.
So yeah, what do you think about the idea of typecasting? Do you think it's like sort of kind of insulting to the actor in a sense that, oh, we know that you can only do this, or is it sort of a safe bet?
So I would be a proponent of a loose application. I think the idea has a lot of use for the actor learning to know themselves
Mm.
to a degree. Um, for example, when I was doing theater, at the end of a year of practice after doing our show,
Mm.
we were hanging out and our coach was just going one after the other. It was like a game of telling each of us what's your casting and your anti-casting,
Okay.
right?
As in what, your own character or like your own
So what is the perfect character to cast you as, and what is the worst
interesting.
character to cast you as?
So what was your best casting type
Right.
character?
So I was given the stock heroic courageous archetype as my typecast.
Typecast. And your anti typecast.
My anti-casting was uh, Malfoy father in Harry Potter.
Oh, Malfoy's. Oh, what the fuck's his name? The older Draco.
Yeah.
Lucius
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 Malfoy
Malfoy.
was my anti-casting,
Oh, really? Interesting.
which is funny because I I gotta try that someday. But I think back then I definitely agree with that. The parameters made sense to the kind of roles I've gotten before, the kind of roles that I went for, that I
Mm.
chose to try and get. So it kind of showed me a mix of what I was good at and what I wanted to a degree. So it allows you to see like what have I been doing until now as an
Mm.
actor, and where you could try to steer the boat, or where you could try to widen the gap.
But did you ever try like acting as like a completely different character from what you're normally cast as? But like by like not as a sort of like, oh, I want to see what this looks like, but as in like I'm genuinely attracted to this type of character.
Um, so I've I've played a character in the Salem Witches that is
Mm.
not exactly he's courageous, but not exactly heroic.
Mm.
He's got courage, he's got balls, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, to me, like he's very much like the more like Joker type esque character. He's more sort of like the charismatic one instead of like the.
right,
I mean, he's not like the sort of like, Captain America. I'm over
right,
here, saving the world type character. He's more sort of like these like he has, he's sus.
right. Yeah. There's something. It's not so much. My casting is not the paragon kind of character, but rather the courageous type. It seems, or
Mm.
the ballsy
Do you ever
one.
try playing a character that's sort of like, I guess, a more cowardly, timid type characters, very more sort of like down low type characters, very much not relying on the dialogue. It's more towards the facial expressions and the actual body language itself.
Right. I don't think I've gotten the chance to play that so much.
But do you think you could like you could
If I could pull it off.
yeah, you could pull it off, or like convincingly pull it off?
I think so. I think at this point in time, I've gotten enough training that I could approach that if that were like the prospect. If I saw that role and I was interested by it,
Mm.
then yeah, I suppose I could chameleon myself into it.
Ooh, you like.
Um,
Yeah. So I do have a question.
there's
I do have a,
also
oh shit. Yeah. Yeah, I do have a question. I do have a question on the actual like training that you get for acting. Like, what do you learn in the acting training? Is it more sort of like traditional Shakespearean acting, or is it very much sort of like I don't know, per project? What is it?
so it's much more like getting in touch with the elements of acting within yourself as a person.
Mm.
And then often we go to Shakespeare or
Mm.
to,
It's often
uh,
yeah.
yeah, we go to the classics, the greats, to, interpret them because they've been interpreted a million
Yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah.
So we're adding our little grain of salt on the mountains of it that already exists for that character. Those stories have become archetypes.
Yeah.
So it's easier to study in relation to direct archetypes, I would say.
Mm.
So, you learn more form, you learn like the forms of walking is
Mm.
one exercise we had where we had to try walking in 7 different manners,
Okay.
and each of them transmits something different. And it's not as simple as like walking fast, walking slow.
Yeah, it's very much body language and
Yeah, it's what you project
yeah.
as you walk.
Mm.
So that was a very interesting exercise that we practiced for a while, and there's a lot of things like that where it's practicing your aura.
Yeah. Have you ever tried, well, because I'm really curious about it, because like you said, Shakespearean sort of pieces have been interpreted and sort of remastered so many times.
Right,
I'm interested in seeing like a Romeo and Juliet where Romeo is just a psychopath.
where Romeo is just a terrible person.
It's kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde type of dynamic where it's like
Right,
instead of like two families being sort of um in opposition with each other, is more sort of Romeo's backstory or Juliet's backstory sort of catches up to them and becomes
right.
a sort of like the reason why they end up dying.
Yeah, so it becomes like the Godfather of
Yeah,
sorts, right?
it's like sort of like, you know, imagine like, well, I mean, in a sense, Joker and Harley Quinn are kind of like
Yeah,
a version of that, where just
to
sort
a
of just.
degree, yeah.
But I'm
Um,
imagining like sort of watching like Romeo be like this sort of like gentleman like, and then you have like the woman like the Harley Quinn esque character, the Juliet character being sort of just like super crazy,
right.
and then there's like the backstory where like everyone's like, why would you even go for that? And then you soon realize that Romeo has also some, you know, crazy thoughts, and he's actually a sadist and whatnot, and
Right, right. That he's even worse, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah,
he finds her killing people like cathartic and sort of
yeah.
like
It's his thing. Yeah, I haven't seen a version like that amongst the tons of versions.
there's our next script. Let's get
Um,
it. There's our next franchise. Let's go.
yeah, the next thing. Uh,
Oh
but
shit.
yeah, I think I haven't gotten to delve into the calculating type of character so
Mm,
much. Um, that's maybe something I'd like to explore.
mm,
Um, but I'm also trying to hone in on, because once you know your typecast,
mm.
you also want to sometimes like,
Diverge from it.
yeah, and but sometimes you also want to figure out what it is about it
Mm.
that gets you that role, or that gets you,
I feel like it's very much your moral alignment that sort of steers you towards that. Very much like a lawful good in D&D terms, where you like characters that are just super like, you know, I guess they have their morals straightened out, even though they don't know. And also, I feel like having those characters also be like interesting, where they're like in Captain America, for example. In the beginning, he's very much lawful good, and in
Yeah.
the end, he sort of just completely sways and sort of started being more chaotic in the sense that he just
Yeah.
doesn't care anymore. He just wants, you know.
Yeah. You're right about that. I think that's another thing is this is more about like writing characters, but
Yeah.
there's the idea of a static character and a character that is changing,
Mm.
right? So some characters go through a whole like we'll take I suppose Tony Stark for example
Mm-hmm.
changes radically
Yeah.
as the stories progress, and meanwhile there's some characters that are static in the sense that from beginning to end they haven't had a
Arc,
realization or necessarily like a
like a
change in their mannerisms
yeah, like an
that
arc, like
changes how they operate,
yeah.
but the world around them and the context around them changes.
Mm.
You know, a good example would be Superman.
Yeah.
That character is never portrayed, I would say, to have a change of heart.
Well, I
He's
mean, the Injustice Superman does the whole.
the true Kal-El, or the true,
Everyone always wants to see the Injustice Superman because he goes ape shit and kills everybody.
yeah, the evil versions aside, um, Homelanders aside,
Omni Man aside.
Omni-Man aside, um, that character, the core of like Kal-El is never like meant to change. He's like a paragon in the sense that like he is the optimal representation of good in his universe in a sense. And so he's like a measuring stick for other characters, right?
Yeah.
To see, to compare. And that's the
Yeah.
thing, the use of a character like that is that they're a measuring stick for everyone else in that world, right? How does he feel about him? How does he feel about that? How do they interact? How do they oppose?
Yeah.
That's like the core of most scripts.
Yeah, bring about contrast to like different characters and see.
Yeah.
But I feel
And-
also that's why Batman and Superman sort of mesh very well because
Yeah.
they're kind of like the opposite spectrums, but they kind of fight for the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a clear point where they collide, but there's also a clear point where they divide,
Yeah.
right? And that's a cool thing where everyone kind of has that idea in the sense they've become archetypes, where everyone can visualize these characters and where they stand to a degree.
I have a question for you in concerning archetypes. Do you feel like, especially like in the fantasy realm, because a fantasy
Right.
realm is like the perfect example of all of the archetypes.
Yeah, the one with maybe the most archetypes.
Yeah. Yeah. And a most reused one. Do you feel
Yeah.
like those archetypes are like essential to like to that specific genre? Like, say if you remove like the heroic character, you make him instead like, I don't know, like a sort of stoic, just like, you know, he just goes about doing stuff for the fun of it, not even just being heroic. He's just doing like, oh, why not?
Right.
Do you feel
So
like, yeah,
I think that's the cool thing is that since fantasy is so attributed with these archetypes,
yeah,
so many authors have tried to actually like get rid of them or try like a experiment of just
yeah,
let's say we remove this element, you know. I think a lot of deconstructions like say Game of Thrones have tried things like this.
yeah,
Lord of the Rings even actually changes some. It doesn't play every trope straight. It
Yeah.
does diverge in some senses.
well, in a sense, the main character isn't the hero.
Yeah, or rather, the main character isn't heroic.
Yeah,
Yeah, like the hero is another character,
yeah,
and the heroic character is also another hero.
yeah,
Like it's cool. There's a lot of Lord of the Rings has a lot more depth in what it does with its archetypes than most people pick up on first viewing, I think. So yeah, to answer your question, I think because of things like Dungeons and Dragons, way more
yeah.
stories have been opened up.
So I feel like stories like in terms of fantasy realm. It should be sort of in a kind of D&D esque type of way, where it's
Hmm.
just literally just like, say, to write Tolkien's was it Lord of the Rings. Imagine like you just have a couple of friends, right?
Right.
You just assign them a role and then have them control
Yeah,
Legolas,
they choose what that character
yeah,
does.
whatever it does, right? It would be quite interesting to see like a sort of a movie or a sort of a storyline where, Legolas is actually a killer, and like he's a bad guy that works for some secret elven assassin that like hates the main branch or whatever,
Right.
or having Bilbo be the one sort of be like the king of whatever because he ultimately saved a kingdom, and then he instead of becoming
Right. If they gave him the crown.
give him the crown, yeah. It'd be
Yeah, I
interesting to
think.
see like those type of characters.
Yeah, I think that's the appeal to many people actually of D&D.
Yeah,
In a sense, getting to have those archetypes walk next to you in a sense, but you can break them yourself as a player,
yeah.
or completely just run with them. You get to choose where you.
Yeah, I feel like because we're such creatures of habit. Whenever a sort of a storyline sort of has a specific type of character that's being played, it's completely like deconstructed and completely like changes its orientation like midway to the film. A lot of people have this sort of like, I don't think that's like that works type of vibe.
Mm,
As in like when, like say in the beginning, there's a good character that ends up being, he's a good guy. He just goes about in the journey, and then something happens, and then he ends up being the main boss, the main villain. You're like, well, how does that work? I feel like it's just plot. It's just for plot. And then like, oh no, actually, it's like a little plot twist, like a Darth Vader type thing where he's actually still good inside or whatever.
right,
But then turns out that he's actually straight up evil from the get go. He's just like pretended to be good. And I was like, what the
right.
fuck's going on? What the hell? Like,
Yeah, um, I think that's also related to what your approach to the classic hero types
yeah,
is, because well, what we learned in our program was there's the classical hero, there's the tragic hero,
yeah.
the epic hero, the anti-hero, the superhero, um and two others that I can't recall. The martyr.
Yeah, the martyr, yeah.
um but all of these different versions of the hero are a different time's conception of what the hero should be.
Yeah, yeah.
Like ages ago, before like Tolkien was inspired by epic fantasy. Like this great fantasy with like kind of Arthurian in the sense
Yeah,
that
yeah.
like
It's
heroes
grandiose. It's
are.
very sort of surreal type of thing.
Yeah, and like it's like Beowulf, and he could slay a billion dragons, and
Yeah,
he
yeah,
can
yeah,
like walk underwater because he's that cool.
yeah.
Like it's all about like everything's a bit over the top,
Mm.
but it's part of like the essence of that kind of world and writing. So the epic hero belongs to that type of universe, right?
Yeah,
So when Tolkien wrote his story, he inserted a couple of epic heroes. One could argue that Aragorn is an epic hero,
yeah,
but he didn't make them the main characters.
yeah.
The main characters were more modern, almost anti-hero types, where
I think it's also the main character is more of the observer. Like he's
yeah,
our
he's a
perspective
ride
is,
along.
yeah, is our perspective in the sense where like
And
we're
yeah,
watching through their eyes.
there's a very cool detail in the book. The movie also tries to implement this, um, which is I when I read it, I was very interested in this idea that Tolkien changes POVs sometimes,
Yeah,
right? But he always, with no exception, chooses for every scene the POV with the least amount of information. The
yeah,
person who knows the least things in the room is the POV.
yeah,
That's like his rule. So throughout the entire trilogy of books, like if in a scene, most of the time it's one of the hobbits, but then there's one scene where Gimli is like he's in the Elven Kingdom, and Gimli does not know this place,
Yeah,
right? So then
yeah.
it's Gimli's the POV.
Well, yeah.
There's like one short scene where like Aragorn is talking to people he doesn't know, so then
Yeah.
Aragorn's the POV.
But I feel like that's a good way for the audience to discover stuff, because ultimately
Yes,
having a POV with a character that's completely ignorant to what's going on
yeah,
kind of
like
reflects
you,
what
like the
we
POV.
exactly. It kind of reflects the
Exactly.
audience in a sense where they're discovering with the character what is going on in this world.
Yeah, in that case, what's cool is that it makes every exposition doesn't just become like exposition, it becomes the character is learning this as well
Yeah.
as you.
Yeah.
So it's a very smart way of weaving in POVs.
In a sense, also it brings about like a connectivity with the audience and the character, where they
Yeah,
sort of like, oh, this sort of epic character that's been portrayed to be this sort of awesome hero that knows everything, that has a solution to kill whatever.
mhm.
Like he's just like us, doesn't know anything about the world. He's discovering this
Right, right.
part of the
He
world
has his
that
own moment of complete ignorance.
exactly. So
Yeah,
in a sense, it also brings about like it also it makes the world a lot
it
bigger as well.
grounds
Yeah,
or it creates some relatability
yeah.
between you and all of these people. Um,
Do you feel like in real life we sort of embody a specific archetype, or like a sort of we like in a sense, do you think we assign ourselves a character trait, or do you think it's more sort of just like
a bit of both. I think we reproduce what we are given. Like what,
yeah,
like if you're told, "Oh, you're like this, you're generous," you will probably have a tendency to be generous or see yourself as generous, and thus you should act in line with your generous personality.
yeah? I do
You
the
know,
exact opposite of what people tell me I am. So I want to break the archetype, but I feel like because whenever you see like a specific, especially in high school, it's very very prominent, where you see a bunch of cliques. Like
mm,
there's different groups of people that have specific character traits. Where like you have the emo guys, or you have you have the otakus, you have the jocks,
sure,
you have this and that. And I find it quite interesting because in real life, as you get older and turn into an adult, you'd hope that these archetypes just remain at school as like a sort of like, oh, I feel embodied or represented or whatever. But in real life, it's kind of the same thing, where like the rich 1%ers are like the fucking jocks, where they're like sort of, everyone loves them, the influencers. Oh my god, look at me, I'm popular. And you have the ones who are sort of like the journalists, who are like the nerds, who are like sort of trying to figure out, are actually trying to expose all of you jocks for being such demons and whatnot. And you have the otakus, obviously, who just like who are the actors, who just love drama and like do theater, dance, singing, whatever. They're like sort of like the artsy type characters. And you have the rest where like the athletics people, there's the bookworms, the scientists. I find it quite interesting how like the world sort of reflects specific archetypes that are like, I don't know.
it's an interesting approach. There's something to be said about a culture um, basing its moral values off the current idea of a hero.
Mm,
Because, like we said, there's like the difference between the classical or epic hero and, say, the anti hero,
mm,
where the anti hero, the classical term anti hero, not the modern term,
yeah.
the classical just means a hero who is not born from heroic origins, who is not maybe particularly good looking, who's not particularly like heroic in,
The traditional approach of what it
yeah,
looks like.
exactly, the aesthetics
Yeah.
of heroism, yet tries. That's the classic definition of anti-hero. Now
Mm.
today we have a new
Yeah.
definition to that word, but that's probably because our modern the most recent idea, the most recent hero type that's been invented is the superhero.
Mm.
And the superhero, as defined by this theory, is half godly, so half a classical hero
Mm.
and half a classical anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
So a part of him is connected to this grander power or
Yeah.
this grander ability to affect change.
Yeah.
But the other half of him is completely unremarkable is the everyman
Yeah.
is inserted within this. So,
So
you
you're
know,
calling every man garbage. You fucking ugly piece of shit.
so no, but I'm calling the everyman.
Every man's a piece of shit. You guys are all anti-heroes.
If every well, that's the thing. What I'm saying is, in a world where maybe the most recent or iteration of the hero is the
Yeah.
superhero, then a lot of us embrace our anti-heroic nature to an
Yeah.
extent.
Well, I think that right now the current meaning of the anti-hero is very much an exaggeration of what the classical meaning is, in the sense that they take everything that is a superhero and then completely flip it on its head. So it's kind of
Yeah,
like, like Deadpool is a perfect example of this, where he's just
yeah,
like not a hero. He's just
yeah.
going about killing. He's an
He,
assassin.
he perhaps he does heroic things along the way, but that
Yeah,
is not the purpose.
exactly. He's not like morally oriented to save people. He's just there because,
Right,
for my selfish reasons, I
right,
want to save this person because, I don't know, they're connected to me somehow, or it's
right.
like, oh, he'll destroy my favorite pizza place, so I don't want to run out
Yeah,
of food, so I gotta save them. You know what I mean? It's very
yeah. It's very much a self-centered. I think in D&D terms, we're talking about like the chaotic neutral
yeah.
type.
Do you believe that in sort of like how do you perceive the average person in like everyday life, for example? Like, how do you feel, or do you believe that the average person is like more towards the lawful, chaotic, or neutral? Good or bad doesn't really matter. It's kind of like that's very much sort of like, you know
Relative.
yeah, it's relative, but like in the
Um,
sense that you think people like love, like, say, in a sense that, like, in our current day, do you believe that people really want to like have rules that they respect and sort of like follow and sort of create order, in a sense, or they're more sort of like
I think
sheep who just fucking run about?
how they're taught by modern society,
Sure.
by school systems, then people are lawful neutral. I think. I
Lawful
think
neutral.
most people would go into that in the sense where they don't particularly think about the not that they don't think, but the moral implications of certain aspects of the world is
Yeah.
not so much what concerns them, but
Yeah, it's
rather just
the
being,
punishment the punishment that they get from not following the law. Yeah.
yeah, being a cog in a machine
Yeah.
is fine for most people, I think.
Yeah.
And I
I feel
don't
like,
say this as a good or bad, but rather just as a my interpretation. I think most people are lawful neutral in this world.
yeah, I guess, well, the way we're sort of we're oriented to sort of follow the rules, or else this will happen. But I think
Yeah,
more people are starting to speak, because, like, now the whole movements are coming up and stuff. They're a lot more,
yeah,
they're more active in trying to, they're pushing boundaries and pushing laws that are nonsensical, in a sense that, or that only apply to one specific demographic and they don't apply to others. So I feel like, in a sense, they're a lot, I guess they're more chaotic in the eyes of the law,
yeah. Well,
or like
if we look
protests
at
and shit. But yeah,
like people in charge, then maybe that would be different.
yeah, no, it's different. They're
It's,
they're they're,
very,
they're very much evil, in a sense. Where, or actually, no, no, I wouldn't even give them that. No, no, the people in charge are very much just like, they themselves are just sheep. I, f-
yeah,
I feel like, in a
lawful
sense,
neutral, I suppose.
yeah, I don't know. Like, for me, in a sense, because even in like companies, for example, like, even like corporate, corporate greed and all that stuff. I don't feel like there's like one person that goes, oh, I mean, there probably is, but I don't think it's like there's one person be like, oh, would be a good idea for our business to thrive, is to fuck it by not paying our employers well, our employees well, and all that stuff. I think it's very much sort of like,
Well, I don't think anyone internally their monologue tells them that,
yeah, I
but
think
I
it's just
think
yeah, just like a something that they're sort of driven to do. I guess it's not
yeah,
like,
they do it subconsciously,
yeah, it's not
or
like,
they do it not thinking of the bad they're doing, but of the good that they're getting,
yeah. That's
right?
why, yeah. And also, like, the problem, because, like, whenever you see those type of people that look at the companies and stuff, and they see that how much of a mess it actually is, they look genuinely clueless. I
Yeah,
I I, I feel like they don't know how, like, how, how Tetris works. Like when you take out fucking a piece in the bottom, or like like Jenga. Like I feel
Right.
like to them it's like, oh, when we take out one piece at the bottom to bring in more to the top, so we have more pieces at the top, we'll be more rich. I don't think they understand like when you take pieces from the bottom, the whole fucking thing crumbles.
Yeah. Yeah. That's. I mean, I suppose if you had to label it in a very like haphazardly way, I guess lawful evil works,
Yeah.
but that depends on their level of awareness to a degree.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there, like you said, there's a lack of realization on their part of the people under them building what they're standing
Yeah.
on.
It's I don't know. It's weird because you can't really call them like evil, or you can't even call them like it's very much ignorant. But it's sort of when you
Yeah,
try to convince them of the story, like, no, it's going very well, and you show them that.
that's my question then. Is someone indoctrinated to do evil, or they're just a pawn? So would you classify like someone who is completely like ignorant and does bad things because of this ignorance? Would you put them in the evil category?
Well, that's the thing. Though. It's I don't think they're I don't even know, because like the thing is in terms of like who taught you this. That's the thing, because
Right,
it's generational thing, right? So
right.
there's no this one person that's sitting above that
Yeah,
sort
it's
of
not one
oversees it.
person.
So
That
I feel like it's a sad thing where like it's sort of the way that the world worked back in the day. They teach it to this person, and that person does it to the other person. And I feel like it's sort of like, because you're in a position of power, like you don't feel the need to change. It's kind of like, oh, if it
yeah,
breaks, then don't break it, like
yeah,
or don't fix it. But as I find it quite interesting, the idea of morality, in the sense that like even in characters, for example, where often enough the ones who are morally good aren't the ones who are like at the top, like
right.
witches, like in terms of
Yeah.
like they're not, like even Gandalf.
Mm,
Like Gandalf, when he was like the gray, he was like fucking, he looked like a homeless dude with a hat, like.
yeah.
And then when he became the white, he was sort of like all godlike and whatever and stuff. But
Yeah, and one could argue the thing that's kind of sad is the white is another person technically.
yeah,
He like he's like a fusion of Saruman and Gandalf
yeah,
in a sense, because like the wizards are like kind of like avatars where they're
yeah,
just like a representation of a larger being, I guess.
deity, yeah.
So like it's like when he appears, the white is like, yeah, the gray died. I'm like
I'm the
I'm
white.
ish him, but not completely.
Yeah, that's why, and in the sense I see like Gandalf as like neutral.
Right.
I don't really see him as good or
He
evil.
can't intervene that much.
Yeah,
That's
I
yeah.
guess he wants order. I know he wants order, but it's not.
Yeah, he's lawful for sure.
But he's not. He's not like, oh, I want to save this particular character. It's like sort of like,
He does want to protect the land to some degree. He tries to like convince the kings in a like non-aggressive manner. But
yeah, he's like the avatar of the actual world itself. I feel it's like
yeah, exactly.
he's not like if, for example, if like Frodo were to get jumped by a couple of goblins, I don't really think he'll care much about Frodo.
He would care, but he wouldn't be like allowed to intervene. He
Yeah,
wouldn't like
you shall not pass. Like no, I don't think he would be like.
he's a bit like a robot
Yeah,
in a
in a
sense.
sense, yeah.
He's programmed to do something.
My question about you in terms of morality, because morality is a very big thing in us in well, not only making decisions, but also like in a sense how you orient your life, and uh how
Right.
you want to pursue what ventures you want to pursue in the future. Do you feel like, because it's so ambiguous, the concept of it's so ambiguous, do you feel like it's sort of there is a one way
A universal morality.
universal way morality in the sense that it's sort of that is like
So
universal good, or
I think it's possible for us to define things that are amoral to a degree, but
how would you define that? Yeah,
everything is within a context of its own.
exactly.
So ultimately, no. But within a frame, there are dimensions that we can define. Um,
because it's often the problem that goes on with, like, well, for wars, for example, a lot of people, argue morality of why would you do that, but then, they counteract that with the same morality of, like, why wouldn't you do that in this situation?
Right.
You know what
Well,
I mean?
that's the thing. I feel like we spoken recently on the podcast of like some complicated issues.
Yeah.
But speaking of those complicated issues, I would argue that morally they're not complicated.
Yeah.
Morally, it's pretty black and white. That's what I mean. Is within a context,
Mm.
if you have enough like
But again,
resources and if you've studied ethics, then it's pretty simple.
but then
From
again, yeah, even
most
though
philosophers would agree
yeah.
all on one side.
But yeah,
Um,
the thing is though, I feel
but
like
if we're talking
even
about
there, like, ignorance also plays a big role in the sense of, like,
exactly,
they
it's
think it's like,
always that to some degree.
like,
But
for example,
for your larger question,
yeah.
um, well, there's philosopher Immanuel Kant who
The fucking
says
cunt,
like
mate.
he wants to embrace these maxims, these universal ideas of good,
Yeah.
and I think he's completely wrong for a bunch of them, and so inherently, I think his idea is wrong. Um, but it's also because it's so extreme that it becomes ridiculous
Mm.
to some degree. But I think that there is something to be like learned from Kant, from some of his ideas. So I wouldn't discredit all of his work at all. But for me, his vision of universal truths and universal goods
Yeah.
are um, rather incomplete, imperfect.
Well, I mean, that's why often philosophers debate on
Well,
such
sure, there's
issues, because
many moral ethics philosophers,
where it's
um, and
ultimately, it's like, there's two, like a very big one where it's either, was it the means justify the ends, or the ends justify the means?
well, yeah, it's most of the time it's is the good intention good, or is the good result
Yeah, the
good,
outcome. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's an argument that is had often.
Well,
And
that's the thing. It's lawful good, or chaotic good.
to some degree, yeah.
Because in a sense, like, lawful would mean, like, you just followed the, like, your intention itself would be good, but just the result itself would just go to shit most of the time. And so, like, I guess in a sense, they're both good morally. It's just that it's by situation, I guess, if you will, where, I don't think eradicating entire culture for the sake of peace would be peace. You know what I mean?
Right. I think most philosophers would agree with that.
Yeah. So, like,
Most.
most of the
Um,
philosophers.
but yeah, I think that's the thing is that if we look at like the history of philosophy in relation to ethics, there's a lot of like common ground that is found, but of course there's always binaries that are imposed, binaries like questions between one and the other.
Yeah.
Um, that kind of renders morality a very gray thing if you look at the ensemble.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's very
so
tough to. I mean, like, that's why I feel like, in a sense, decisions driven by simply, like, by just morals, like, it doesn't really, like, they're not just, I guess, in a sense. Well, that's why,
right,
in a sense, like, it's very, our capabilities of being both emotional and being rational also helps us sort of
yeah,
complete the
I think
tools.
most a lot of philosophers agree with that, where the just being staunchly like logical renders some lapses in morality, in
Yeah.
ethics, and to some degree to have an understanding of a situation better, a more human understanding of a situation,
Mm.
emotion is required
Mm.
to understanding context, to understanding what it means. Um, and so I think, and we've talked about like objectivity before, It's related to the idea that true objectivity for a human being is acknowledging bias, not pretending there is none, but rather just coming out clean with bias, and then as well as that, having the bias in mind, making a decision. So to a degree, feelings really do affect facts.
So let us know what you guys think about that. Facts or feelings, are they the same? Yo, fucking title shot this shit. But anyways, we're gonna change the format of the podcast. We'll make it a lot shorter in a sense because it'll help us as well.
More bite sized.
We're we're so busy. But so stay tuned for the next episode. We'll post every single Friday. Last episode was with Sammy. Check him out. He's done a lot of work. You know what I'm saying? Follow him on Instagram. We'll put
funny
it
guy.
We'll put it on the description below. So it's been Daryl.
It's been Phil.
And this has been the NewCrown podcast. Yeah, cue music, Jay.